All right, good night and good evening, everybody. It is 6 p.m. on December the 13th, 2023. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee, and I will call the meeting to order. This being the first Finance Committee meeting since our reorganization meeting last week. Our new Finance Committee is myself, Mark Sirota, as the chair. Jenna Evans continues on as the vice chair. Alima Redding, who is not here tonight, continues on as a member. And Tricia Barvia, who was sworn in yesterday, has also been named as our fourth board member. And Trish, did you have a statement?
Thank you, Mark. For the last 5 weeks since becoming the center of our current firestorm, I've been in deep reflection, introspection, and conversation with others who are trying their best to also navigate this moment. First and foremost, there are people who are sincerely hurt by the pain my post caused. That pain is something I regret deeply, and I'm sorry. One life skills lesson that we teach at my school is that when we make a mistake, we do our best to make it right. The challenge, of course, is discerning what right is. For many, the only right path forward is for me to resign my seat. They have one story about me. They have searched and scrutinized my social media and elsewhere for evidence to support this single story of me, selectively highlighting details that make me, quote, guilty by association. They have called my place of work, spoken to the press, and sent emails to universities where I've been invited to speak, all in an effort to discredit me or worse. Throughout this entire process, I committed myself to taking things one step at a time, to see the democratic process through on behalf of those who voted for me and who have encouraged me to continue. Yesterday afternoon, I was sworn in at the district office, and I took the word seriously. To prepare for this meeting tonight, I watched the board meeting from last week. It is clear to me that despite however willing I am to listen and learn and dialogue, I will not be able to serve in the capacity that I had hoped. The work that the board has ahead is too great and important, and I do not want to derail from that work. Effective immediately, I am resigning my position as school director. My hope has always been that in serving, I could help deepen and expand our collective capacity to listen and find a way to dialogue, even through profound disagreement. It's what I have done as a teacher my entire life. There have been many times that I've disagreed with things that students, colleagues, parents, and even friends think and say. But through it all, I always held that the person sitting across from me is a person whose life experiences and truths matter. Although the voices at the last two meetings have been largely one-sided, these are not the only voices in the community. In the last few weeks, I've sat across from, talked on the phone with, and Zoomed with many different members of the community, Jewish and non-Jewish. I'm grateful for the generosity of their time and spirit, individuals who showed compassion, kindness, and openness towards me when they were not required to do so, individuals who refused to reduce me and my personhood to a single story. I've spoken to Jewish members of the Upper Dublin community who shared their stories and histories with me. And despite even being offended by the content of the posts that I shared, and despite this disagreement, they still encouraged me to serve. I've been trying to honor their hope and my own, that there can be healing through service, that is an action that matters. There are also some, regardless of the post I shared, who will disagree with everything I represent and stand for. Individuals who are critical of and against diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I try to do. One parent I spoke to and who signed the petition told me they roll their eyes whenever they hear the words equity and inclusion, that for them, DEI is all about woke cancel culture. My fear is that there will be those in the community who will use what's happened to me to derail the very real and necessary work of equity and inclusion that our community needs now more than ever for all kids. There is so much pain right now. There's the pain of those who have come forward to speak, and there's the pain of those who are afraid to speak. There's the pain of those who demand that their pain be seen and heard, and there's the pain of those who hide their pain for fear of retribution. I'm heartened by those who've responded to this moment by working through their pain to seek understanding and compassion, starting from a place of humility, knowing that none of us is perfect and that we all make mistakes. I hope that my resignation will open up a space for the healing work that needs to happen. Like I said, Although the voices in this room are vocal and one-sided, they are not the only perspectives. There are many other differing perspectives in the community who also need to be heard. Please talk and listen to each other. I want to thank those who voted for me, who have continued to support me, and those who have counseled me through this difficult time. Finally, I want to end with the words of Rabbi Sharon Brous, whose sermons were recommended to me by many Jewish and non-Jewish people who are trying to find a way forward. Speaking to her fellow Jews 1 week after the October 7 attack, Rabbi Brous urged that we who have been excluded by the narrow scope of others' moral concern must not narrow the scope of our moral concern to exclude others. I hope that in moving forward, the community can expand our moral concern to include as many as we can in our circle of care. Thank you. And with that, I'll excuse myself.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Barvia. So at this point, so this is Finance Committee meeting. We now have 2 members present of the Finance Committee. And so we will continue the meeting with only 2 of us, which is not a quorum, which means that anything we discuss tonight and whether the 2 of us agree to move it forward or not will not come at the legislative meeting with a formal recommendation of the Finance Committee, but presumably will be reintroduced at the legislative meeting next week. Anyone else have anything? Dr. Smith?
I would just comment that given the resignation, we will plan on getting something out to our community by the end of this week regarding what the timeline and the process will be that the board would like to follow to fill the position. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And while not specific to the Finance Committee, I'll remind everyone, so we have 30 days to fill that seat effective tonight. So that brings us to probably January 12th. And there's obviously 2 weeks in there that will not be productive. So we're going to have a very shortened timeline to fill the seat. But that's a matter for another time. All right, let's move on to the Finance Committee meetings. We have one presentation tonight regarding the Upper Dublin High School softball field project. Mr. Leckman.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. So I will introduce this, and then I'll ask our professionals that have joined us tonight to walk us through where we're at. So just as a quick background we have some new folks at the table and in the room. In September, we reviewed a plan to engage Architera to provide professional services to design needed improvements to our Upper Dublin High School softball fields. Just as a brief summary of what we discussed in September, the need we discussed was the high school backstops at both the varsity and junior varsity field have been in need of a replacement for a couple of years now. And additionally, when we started to dig into that field, one of the things that Mr. Hyland, who is also here tonight, our athletic director, talked to us about is that the requirements for a softball field under PIAA rules is for the distance from home plate to the backstop to be 25 feet, and right now we only have 10 feet there. So that's the need among a number of other things that you'll hear tonight. The opportunity that we have is 2 years ago we had obviously the tornado do a whole lot of damage to our facilities. And one of the things that became apparent right as we were sort of closing out the evaluation period was the fencing on the varsity softball field was damaged, and Utica agreed that that we would be compensated to replace that with our insurance proceeds. That was valued at about $233,000. The decision that we made, or the recommendation that we made, was we utilize that $233,000 among some other engineering credits that we received from value engineering that was done by our professionals on the insurance project to do a full-scale renovation of our varsity softball field and then a backstop replacement at our JV field. And that's what we're moving forward with as a recommendation. So that's a brief background. We have worked closely with our professionals from Architera and ICS, and we thank them for being here tonight with us. And I will turn it over to them, and they will walk us through more details about the work we've all been doing over the last 2 months. So I'll invite you all up, and you can certainly introduce yourselves.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us, and nice to see everyone again. To those of you that are new, welcome and best wishes. My name is Bill Slaughter. I am the construction manager for ICS. So we have developed this program in team with Architera, Architera doing the design and ICS doing the implementation. I brought with me tonight Megan Sarcinello, who you guys all know as the project manager for Fort Washington, Thomas Fitzwater, and other projects. We have Mr. David Horn from Architera and Mr. Micah Muchler from Architera as well. So I'm going to turn it over to them and let them get into the details of things. But thank you.
Go to the next slide. So just running through the agenda we have tonight, the softball field, Architera is going to go through the base bid drawings. Then they'll go through the alternate drawings as well and the cost estimate. And then we'll circle back with next steps and the timeline. So Dave and Micah, do you want to take it from here?
Good evening, I'm Dave Horn. I'm a principal with Architera, and we've been working on this project since September and have been delighted with the progress thus far. There were 3 main objectives we applied to the design and renovation of the varsity softball facility here at Upper Dublin. The first was we wanted to make sure the facility met national and state standards relative to the sport of high school softball. Secondly, we wanted to enhance the safety aspects of the venue whenever possible. And then finally, we wanted to, in our improvement strategy, create a sense of place unique to the Upper Dublin softball program to help give the girls a feel for permanence in their facility and pride as well. And we think we're well on our way to achieving all 3 objectives. The improvements that are in the base bid include moving home plate towards center field from its current location 15 feet. By keeping the backstop in its general location that it is now, but replacing it, and shifting home plate, we gained that 25 feet minimum requirement for the distance between home plate and the backstop. There is room to do that without compromising the JV softball field or even the 9-on-9 soccer field that might be overlaid between the 2 home plate areas. Secondly, we're going to drop the infield elevation about 6 inches because by shifting the home plate towards the outfield, even by as little as 15 feet, the grade that exists now in what's a very well-established lawn area for the outfield also dips down. And by dropping the entire new infield location by about 6 inches, we're able to keep over 90% of that outfield grass as is and surgically cut in the shape of the new infield. And that gives a faster permanence post-construction for the ability to be able to use the venue faster. We're going to also create, as you may see in the image, an outfield fence permanently at a distance of 200 feet from home plate. Softball is one of those sports where you're allowed a range, where the outfield fence can be located anywhere from 185 feet to 235 feet from home plate. In talking and meeting with Upper Dublin personnel and including the head coach of softball, the preference for a 200-foot outfield distance seemed to prevail, and that is what we're showing with, as I mentioned, some of the added safety features, a permanent warning track. Anytime you have a vertical element close to the proximity of the field of play, you want to give certain cues to the athlete, especially in the sports of baseball and softball, where oftentimes the direction of the eye is upward, trying to catch the ball while you're moving laterally. And those warning tracks near fence elements are a big safety plus. We're going to reuse the infield mix that currently exists, but because we're expanding the amount of infield mix we're going to need, we're also going to add about 1/3 of the total mix as a special infield conditioning material that helps to eliminate excessive moisture in the early springtime. And again, that puts usability of the field faster during those initial wet weeks of March and early April. We're going to also add an underdrain to the infield system, which will help to prepare the field after a rainstorm. The new backstop is going to be a 30-foot tall, black vinyl coated chain link fence type backstop. All fencing that's proposed, whether it be the outfield fencing, the team area fencing, or the backstop fencing, will be a black vinyl chain link fence, which is a standard that is slowly gaining momentum and a foothold here on the campus as various venues are being improved. There will be new dugout types of team area shelters. We call them dugouts, but in this case, they will be on grade, not sunken down into the soil. But they will be 42 foot long. It'll be a steel cantilevered type structure. And it is a structure we've used in other high schools in southeastern Pennsylvania. And one that your softball coach, Coach Boyer, had shared with us was something she had preferred in her tour of other venues that she shared with us, and we're able to accommodate that wish with that 42-foot long shelter. You can see on the image before you that the rooftop of that shelter is going to be red and gray striped, which is again another feature that the coach was pulling for. That shelter will have an 8-foot high black vinyl chain link fence in front of it as well as behind it. And that is an effort to better maintain some privacy and segregation between the people using the field of play, not just the players, but the officials and the coaches, from the general public who may be spectating the venue. We are going to provide spectator seating for about 100, minimally 100 people at this venue. By using 2 relocated small bleacher units, we're able to formally place seats totaling 45 on each side, the first base and third base sides of the facility, with additional area for lawn seating right next to it. The game management will occur behind the backstop and will be in the form of some hardscape, some concrete that also has a scorer's table and gives an excellent vantage point. Those are the only people encouraged to be behind home plate, the game management folks. But we do have a niche created there for them. And you can see there's also a new added feature, which is a single bullpen element. By that I mean a single pitcher's rubber and a single home plate for each team, the home and the away team, within close proximity there, as well as preservation of the batting cage that's in the upper left of the graphic in front of you, the larger rectangle. There will be a new scoreboard located in right center field, and new foul poles 25-foot tall down each foul line. Finally, we're going to add some new landscaping to not only improve the aesthetics of the facility, but also to help in that segregation of general public from game participants. And then the storage structure that's out there now, there's a small shed. There's anticipation that perhaps a minimally increased size of that shed may occur. We're going to create a slightly larger concrete pad for that shed to be accommodated. And also a job box near the first base side dugout area. All of the facility, that is to say the game management area, the dugouts or team areas, and the spectator seating that's formally accommodated by the small bleacher units are all ADA compliant in this new design. At the JV facility, which is diagonally opposite from the home plate of the varsity baseball in the lower left area of the field, we will, as part of the base bid, similarly replace the backstop that's there now with a 30-foot tall identical chain link black vinyl fence unit, and add additional team area protection with 8-foot high team area black vinyl chain link fencing in front of both bench areas. So that's an overall description and plan view of the base bid component. You can see there some photographs of what the cantilevered dugout unit will look like, and we think it's going to be a great improvement to the varsity softball and junior varsity baseball programs. My colleague Micah is going to run you through some of the alternate bid elements and a very brief discussion on some of the overall costs and budget as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for having us here tonight. Micah Mutchler, I'm a landscape architect with Architera. I'm going to run through the alternate options that we have. All these alternates are anticipated to add costs, so they're add alternates. None of them would really reduce costs, but they're all ways to further enhance this project. The first alternate we have is changing the backstop from a chain link fence to a net system. So it would be the same type of system that's at the varsity baseball field. The next alternate we have is providing clay bricks for the infield pitcher's rubber and the home plate. These will be below the infield surface, and they help to maintain the grade and reduce the needed maintenance to continue keeping the grade set. The next alternates along the first baseline were extending fencing and the warning track from the bleachers all the way to the outfield fence. And then another alternate doing the same thing along the third base side, having the fence connect from the bleachers to the outfield fence. With these two alternates, then we would have the softball field fully enclosed with fencing and to help unwanted traffic through the field. Another alternate then is providing clay bricks for the two bullpen areas for the same reason as it would be recommended for the infield. The next alternate, the batting cage in the same general area as the existing batting cage. We're showing cost for a new batting cage that we set on a concrete pad topped with rubber base material and then synthetic turf on to remove anywhere from that within that batting cage area. Then the last alternate we have listed here is for the junior varsity field, likewise proposing a net backstop system instead of the chain link fence system. On to the next slide. So here we have all the estimated costs for various aspects of the project. The base bid costs is all the elements that Dave reviewed with the base bid plan. That comes to a total of $722,073. Next line we have here is the alternates cost estimate total, and this is the total for all suggested ad alternates. We can pick and choose from any of these, but all of them together come to a total of $158,123. Further breakdown of these alternates: the varsity backstop area, that covers that cost of $51,629, includes upgrading to the net backstop system, and also includes the clay bricks for home and pitcher's mound. The varsity perimeter fencing and warning track of $23,290 is for both along the first base extension and the third base line extensions. Varsity bullpens, the $11,500, that's simply just for adding the clay pavers to the bullpens. The remaining aspects of those bullpens are within the base bid costs. Next, we have the varsity batting cage, $25,825. That's for a new cage, concrete base, rubber pad, and synthetic turf surfacing. The last of the alternates is the junior varsity backstop. That's just a backstop for that field going to a net system instead of the chain link. And then a total for the base bid and all of those alternate options, we come to a total of $880,196. Again, you can pick and choose from the alternates what suits best and what results you might get from the bidding process. Best aspects for the field. I'll now turn it back to Megan.
So the next steps, we have the timeline shown here. In January, we'll start preparing the bid documents. February, we plan to advertise for bid. And then in March, we'll come back to the Finance Committee and present our bid results. And then construction would be scheduled to start in June after the softball team is completed with their season, pending board approval. Anybody have any questions?
All right, thanks to all of you. Starting with committee, Jenna, do you have any questions?
I do. I have a couple. So I'm going to need some help, and maybe this comes from, more from administration than, from the team we have here from Architera. But on the alternates, I need a little help with, cost benefit analysis on those. My youngest plays Little League. That's, so not quite at this level yet, and not softball. So I need a little help kind of gauging how critical some of these items are so we can assess, what alternates. I guess related to that, maybe one question for the Architera folks for now is, do we need to decide on these now? Would you put it out to bid with all of these included?
Yep, that's
Okay.
correct. It would go out to bid with all these included. And then
Okay,
you can
and then
make
we
your
could decide
decision.
later.
Yep.
So, okay, so it doesn't have to be tonight, but at some point that would be helpful for me, and I'll probably talk to some softball parents to get some perspective there. Question on the design itself. So I didn't say this at the beginning. I think this is great. We're doing this. I think this facility clearly needed some enhancement. Looks like we're doing a lot of things to bring it in line with the varsity baseball facility. So I think that's all great. So I'm very much in favor of this as a concept. This is just purely a design question. The bullpen areas, does that pose any risk to the lawn seating area with, I'm not sure which kind of, direction this would necessarily be, but I guess maybe they're going to be throwing away from the lawn seating would be the, yeah.
Yeah. So, Micah, can I use your pointer, please? Okay. Okay.
Or not.
So Are we clear on where the bullpens are based on the graphic?
Yep, I see it's
Okay.
right under where it says lawn seating on the right-hand side. Yep, yep.
So we have the picture. First of all, the quick answer to your question, throwing and even possible overthrowing
Right, that's what I'm,
of
yeah.
that area is nowhere near the lawn seating. Well, with the exception on the third base side.
That's what I was thinking. On the
So-
first base side looks good, but the third base side looks, yeah.
So how we designed this was the pitcher is closest to home plate throwing
Yep, makes sense.
towards down towards
Toward the outfield, basically, yeah.
towards Fort Washington Avenue. And there is a fence. You can't possibly see it from here, but there is a fence behind where the catcher is located to catch any pass balls that are at least close to the catcher. But if there is a pass ball in both instances, it just simply goes beyond, traverses out into the greater outfield area beyond the outfield fence, where there should be no one. So that's about as safe of an orientation we could come up with.
Yep, makes sense. And then I think my other question was, Mr. Leckman, can you remind me how much money did we have? You covered it, but it's already flown out of my head. So as I'm looking at these numbers, it's relevant. Yeah.
So I'll cover both of your cost-based questions. We had initially talked last month about $750,000 was the ballpark estimate for this project. So I think when you look at the base bid, it falls very much within that number that we talked about last month. In your question of in the alternates, what can we do without? I think that's exactly precisely why we call them alternates, right? So it's the same discussion as budget where we looked at what are the absolute needs as we defined with Mr. Hyland and the softball coach, and we built that into the base bid. And then all of the alternates are, we get to see what the prices look like when it comes back and then determine where we want to go with that. I think when we talked about it, just as a matter of fact, is we thought the alternate that fenced in the entire field was really important from a safety perspective, keep a space between, the spectators and the players. Also from just, community walking dogs through the area, it sort of keeps it as a clean area for the players. But they're all alternates. When they come back in, we'll get to decide if we want to choose any of them, all of them, or none of them at all.
All right, thanks. I have a couple of questions as well. Starting with landscaping, you mentioned new landscaping. I assume that's all the sort of little shrubbery we see behind on the outside of the field, but the existing trees that are along the lockout side on the slope, those are the existing trees that are already there. We're not touching those. Is that right? Okay. And just to clarify the dugout structure, if we go back to the previous slide, Brooke, so one of those pictures shows a fence backside and one shows a walled backside. We're talking about a fence. This is to show the roof more. We're still talking about a fenced backside, right? Yes. Okay, thank you. For those who can't hear because you're watching from home, he answered affirmative to both of those questions. And I just want to clarify too, for the junior varsity backstop, it says on the base bid slide, it says with padded timbers. So there's padded timbers, whether or not we do the alternate, it's just a question of whether it's netting or fencing, is that?
Correct. There's padded timbers either way to help save or add longevity to the fabric from balls hitting it. It tends to stretch and distort. So by putting the wood backstop there and the padding, not only do all three backstops look the same, but they also help with the longevity of the fabric.
Okay, so it's a question of I'll say netting or fencing material. They're not steel poles in the base bid that are part of, a steel fencing kind of model. They're either way, it's wood.
The base bid is steel poles, right? They would be the black vinyl and chain link material. The alternate would be for the, steel poles specifically for netting. So they would be different diameters depending on which one you pick, same height, different spans between them.
Okay, so is that So on the, just to clarify, on the base bid document on the lower left or junior varsity field, it says new 30-foot height backstop fence with padded timbers. That's not correct then for the base bid? It should be.
No, it is. It'll be a chain, so the backstop material is either going to be chain link or netting.
Right.
Base bid is chain link, and alternate would be netting.
Yeah.
Both of those would receive the timbers and the padding.
Okay. All right, I'm picturing, so maybe I'm just picturing the wrong place. The timbers, I was picturing the timbers being the vertical supports for that, but that's
No,
not
they're
what it is.
horizontal from the ground up about 3 feet.
Okay, so it's a little wall behind. it in
Yeah,
the
it's
lower
to
part
stop,
of it.
so in the netting, it's to stop the balls from passing beyond. But in the chain link instance, it's to protect the fabric from distorting and
I
stretching.
understand. Okay, so I misunderstood what that meant. All right. Thank you. So that's my questions. Any questions from other members? Oh, Jenna, go ahead.
Sorry, I knew I had one more. Can we talk about the impact on the soccer field? So did I hear correctly, the 9v9 would still fit, but there's also an 11v11 there, right? Would that
Currently.
go? Yeah, yeah. So
With the
that,
installation of the outfield fence, you'd be down to 9x9.
got it, okay. And we did talk about that the last time, that was a likely outcome. I wanted to confirm. So,
That was discussed with the soccer program
Yep.
by your administration, yeah.
okay, all right. And both, when you say soccer program, both, Upper Dublin, our own school soccer program, but also the Upper Dublin Soccer
Outside
Club?
group, yes.
Yep, okay, all right. Thank you.
Titia.
Yeah, the ADA compliant. It looks to me like there are steps coming down, or am I misreading that diagram from the corner to, well, I don't know what direction it is, but from
So
the
there-
corner to the back plate.
There are steps, but there's also a ramp to the left of that, and then there is ADA access from the first base side.
All right, so let's just, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a ramp, yeah.
Okay.
So that is a ramp, I apologize.
I see. All right. Then in terms of the timeline, so if you're going to do this work, if it would start in June, does that then make the field available for fall soccer, or is that off the table at that point?
So we have the recommendation to close the field itself until the spring, but outside of the perimeter fence would be available. So yes, soccer would be available for the fall.
All right. Yes, and I had that other question for the 9v9 versus the 11v11. So, all right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mary Beth? Jeff, Mary Beth needs a mic.
Just because I remember from an 11v11 game there, and that wooden partition between the parking spots on Loch Alsh and the field. Like, is there handicap parking there that people can get to the field?
So we would have to designate handicap parking spots.
Okay, I think, and there's like nowhere to get through that fence, I think.
We're going to rework some of that wood National Park fence in
Okay.
order to accommodate that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, this looks good. So thank you all for the presentation. We have no action to take at this point, nothing to recommend, but we look forward to the next steps. Thank you
Okay,
very
great.
much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, moving on to the regular business part of the agenda. Any announcements, Mr. Leckman?
I do not have any announcements.
All right, we do have minutes from our October and November meetings. There are 2 months here because there was not a quorum last month to actually approve those minutes, and we don't have a quorum this month to approve those minutes. So I think what that means is next month we will have 3 months worth to approve. As a matter of procedure, I think Jeff probably should double check whether there is any timeliness requirement for us to actually approve those minutes in a certain time frame. I don't recall this ever happening before. So if there is, we will try to address it at the legislative meeting, I suppose, when hopefully a majority of the Finance Committee are present and able to approve the minutes. So we'll figure that out for next week. I understand. I have as well, but there's still only two of us. So, all right, let's move on to the reports and recommendations, starting with capital planning.
Yes, thank you. So as it's already December, Mr. Lester and I have already started internal conversations about projects that we would like to achieve this summer. And while we've got a lot already on our plate, we do have a couple other minor items that we do want to get covered this summer as well. So in order to get out in front of these, what we want to talk about tonight is we've prepared a presentation to walk through our 5-year capital plan, which will cover a number of things from what we currently have completed, what's underway, and kind of what we think the next 5 years look like as part of our maintaining our $300+ million worth of district facilities. So just a quick background and brief history for any new folks listening along here tonight. We have been working on our capital plan and working with our partners at ICS since back in prior to the pandemic in 2020. And actually during that time when our buildings were closed, June 2020, ICS was in our buildings and evaluating all of our buildings, completing a facility condition assessment. That facility condition assessment was an evaluation of buildings as they currently exist, and then the work that we need to do on building infrastructure and systems to maintain those buildings in good working order. So at the same time we were doing that, obviously we were working through a pandemic, and then a year later we had a tornado sort of upend the work we were doing, but also impact some facilities where we knew we had work that needed to do. So it was certainly not a process that we ever hoped to go through again, but it certainly kept us moving forward with our facilities plans. Over the last 2 years, we've accomplished a significant amount of building improvements, which Mr. Lester will briefly touch on tonight. But as we look forward and continue to plan for the next 5 years, we have 6 buildings, 2 of our elementary schools still being old and in need of repair. We have an administration center, and as I mentioned, they're valued at over $300 million. So while we will continue to do work, that work will never end. We need to continue to maintain our buildings over time. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mr. Lester. He's going to walk us through, like I said, the work that we've done, where we've been, what we're currently have in the planning stages, and then a 5-year plan of what we intend to do over the next 5 years, and then I'll cover some of the financial information at the end.
Yes. Okay, for our next slide, we start with the reports from ICS when they were here 2020, and we had a condition assessment made for each of the buildings. And the slide on the left is the number of years since a major renovation was first presented. This has been updated to work that we've done at Fort Washington. We include the high school, and now that Sandy Run is new, that has been added to this graphic. So Fort Washington and Sandy Run are both within the year for full renovations. But looking back at the buildings that haven't been touched for quite a long time was Thomas Fitzwater. It's been 33 years since a major renovation. Maple Glen is coming up on 23 years old. That's never had a renovation since it has been built. We have been doing work in there, but not a major renovation. And Jarretttown Elementary has been 27 years since its last renovation. And closing in, believe it or not, is the high school. High school is now 14 years old. We're approaching the lines quickly where we want to start looking at renewing some of the systems in the building. We're getting to the end of the life that we can see in our near future that we want to talk about within the next 5 years. And then we have the facility condition assessment, a look at what the condition scale is, a kind of a rating of our buildings, where we stand. And below is a scale that they've been using. And Jarretttown right now is the one building. It's just over 45% on the scale, which is in the higher range of needing work done in the future, making decisions on that building. But as of now, it is in good operating condition, which is why as we move forward through our plans, it really did have say how we move forward, especially with Thomas Fitzwater being the next building that we're going to be undertaking work at. But all the buildings are other than that, are in the good to fair condition range. If we can move to the next. So over the past 2 years, we've had a lot of work done, and some of this was prompted by the tornado. So our 5-year capital plan right now doesn't look like it did 3 years ago. We had some decisions made for us in which directions to move and which projects to take on first. But the district cost only, this doesn't include any other items because of the storm damage, but our cost to renovate Fort Washington Elementary, which has been a full renovation throughout that building, HVAC, electric, lighting, the casework, doors, everything has been touched in that building right now. That work is $12 million, just over $12 million. We also finished replacement of the gym roof at Maple Glen. Yes, that roof was the same age as the rest of the building, but we did have some worse leaks on there, and there was infrastructure that could be damaged by the leaking roof in the gym that doesn't pertain to the rest of the building. So that project was taken on first, and that was completed at the end of the summer for $206,000. We also had a water heater replacement that originally was not in last year's capital planning. That was further down the road, but we had a failure on the water heater replacement at Maple Glen, and it was determined at that time that it was better for us to replace the unit entirely than trying to make an expensive repair. That was $59,000. With the work at Fort Washington and conditions that we had boiler replacements at for Thomas Fitzwater, we had failing boilers that desperately needed work. I wasn't sure if moving forward how far in the future these would last. And we had, with the renovations at Fort Washington, 2 relatively new boilers that still had a lot of life left. So that really made us look at what we had, what we could do. And we were able to reuse the boilers at Fort Washington. We originally looked at Thomas Fitzwater, but they weren't. They were too big for Thomas Fitzwater, but they were just right for Maple Glen. So we decided to take on another project last summer. We replaced both the boilers at Maple Glen and Thomas Fitzwater, and we went from the old style cast iron, a lower efficiency, to a higher efficiency condensing boilers now. So we have much more efficient work, and we saved on the cost of the boilers at Maple Glen because we were able to reuse the boilers from Fort Washington. And another system that we replaced that was just coming up on a little over a year ago now, it was done this time last year, was the pool UV system. So we had failures on the UV system for the pool. It's part of our kind of a belts and suspenders on a disinfection system. We decided to, instead of making repairs on there, it was time to replace, and that was at $45,000. So for this year, what we've brought to the board and have approved already is the building renovations. We call it above the ceiling renovations for Thomas Fitzwater, which is going to be HVAC, additional sprinkler systems, replace the lighting that's in the rooms. And this cost to be spread over 2 years. It's a 2-year project. We're doing this since we're doing this work over the summers. That was $8,860,000. And as part of our boiler work at Maple Glen, we found work that we needed to do on the control systems. Parts of the control systems were failing and needed to be upgraded. So we had a price as part of the original project, which led to these additional upgrades, which are approved and will be actually occurring probably the next few months. We'll finish up on this work. But that was an additional $213,000 for updated building automation controls. And last month, we brought the bids back, the natatorium rooftop units. These provide the dehumidification and ventilation for the pool. And unfortunately, they were not the ones that blew off the roof at the time of the tornado. So we were having to replace them. They are at the end of their life because just the chlorine in the air, the corrosive, and they run 24/7 to maintain conditions in our pool area. And that was $1.231 million for a total of $10,304,890. That's approved and work that we will be completing by the end of the summer. We have additional projects that we are going, that we'll be presenting as we move through the rest of the school year and prepare for the summer work. We have playground equipment at Jarretttown Elementary that needs replacing. Just by our inspections, we knew we had one piece of equipment last year that really wasn't compliant. We felt that it was getting to the unsafe level, so we did remove that over the summer and patch the area, but we would really like to replace that and be prepared for the next piece of equipment that will be aging out. Our estimates on that is $125,000 for additional playground equipment. As part of our assessment, we're constantly reviewing our sidewalks, any asphalt repairs for parking lots. For the high school and Thomas Fitzwater, we're looking to spend $70,000 this summer. We're working on putting those packages together. And as we just discussed, the softball field renovations be approximately $750,000. And this is a new item that we have not talked about. It was further down on our list. But again, this was an equipment failure. We have the domestic water boiler replacement. I do call these domestic water boilers. They are much more powerful than a water heater that you would see. So when you see these numbers, people might think about the water heater in their house. These are 1,000 MBUs. They're very large units. We had one with the heat exchanger failure. Again, the cost of the heat exchanger is $50,000. It doesn't make sense to put that money into a unit that's 14 years old now. So we're looking to do a replacement of that, and that's going to be about $100,000. Right now, we're working on gathering pricing and specifications, but this is listed under the summer of 2024, but I believe this is going to occur before that, just because of timing we can get done. We have enough capacity on the remaining boiler that we have. I just don't like to run on one, rely on the one, because our kitchens, our locker rooms all rely on that one. So any failures will impact our operations. So this is something we want to move faster rather than later. Looking forward, we had really a 10-year outlook from our facility condition assessments, and we're putting these projects together, and they're based on what expected lifetimes are, but it's also based on our knowledge of where we stand with this equipment. Maple Glen, the remainder of the roof is due for the 25-26 school year. That's estimated at just over $2 million. We're going to be doing fire alarm replacements. Maple Glen is the oldest system. Fort Washington, Thomas Fitzwater, and Jarretttown, they're newer systems, but we learned that parts are going to be no longer available in another year or so. So we're looking at doing a full replacement of those systems. To replace the fire alarm systems in those 4 buildings is just over $1 million. Maple Glen is due for some windows. If you go through the building, we're starting to lose the seals on some of the corridor windows, not the classrooms. As you walk through the corridors, you might see some discoloration. We're looking for $100,000 to replace the windows in the corridors. Also, we have some exterior wall repairs that are recommended for Maple Glen. Under the classroom windows, it was a decorative tile that was installed. It looked great, but it doesn't hold up to the wet and freezing weather very well. So those need to be replaced. And there'll be $142,000 was the estimate that we're budgeting for on that. Upper Dublin High School will be due for lighting changes, more efficient lighting. These are still T8 fluorescent lamps. While they're more efficient than we've had at the other schools, they are due to be upgraded. LED would be the way to go for energy savings. And right now it's about a $1.1 million. And that also includes all the exterior lighting around the building. And then again, paving repairs, we're looking at about $195,000, but this time we'll be focusing on Jarretttown and the high school. And high school is going to be recurring through the years instead of one large project and shutting down the parking lot for the summer. We're looking to do sections of the building as needed, but still maintain our function of the building through the summer. Moving into 26-27, we're looking at parking lot paving, this time adding Maple Glen. They'll be due for a full parking lot paving that summer. And we have some ADA upgrades that we need to start discussing at Jarretttown. just generally around the building, but also we have a 2-story section of the building. We really don't use the lower level as much as we could, so an elevator would be needed if we're doing ADA upgrades to the building, looking at that. During the summer, we'll have finished Thomas Fitzwater the previous summer, so we're looking that Jarretttown would be the next building to naturally to take a look at, and it would be the same scale of renovation that we did at Thomas Fitzwater, that above the ceiling for HVAC, casework, lighting, sprinkler system. Again, that would be a 2-year project, but we're showing it in the budget because we would be asking for approval for that project for the 26-27 school year. The total for the 26-27 school year is just over $11 million. The next year, it seems like we're taking a little bit of a break, but we'll be continuing with Jarretttown during that summer as well. Again, we're looking for another $100,000 into the high school's parking lot. The last year that we'll be looking at, more projects are coming up, the 28-29 school year as part of our 5-year plan. Again, if it's not within the 5 years, we have all the buildings, what their assessments are. And again, next year we'll be presenting an additional year to this plan. So the final year of our plan we'll be finished with Jarretttown, and it's really time to look at Maple Glen upgrades. So again, Maple Glen upgrades for HVAC, just over $2 million. The intercom system that we use for that building is $335,000. Again, lighting upgrades, again, if we're in the ceilings working, we're going to do lighting, which right now is estimated $810,000. The generator will be at the end of its life, so another $331,000 for an emergency generator to back up the building. At the high school, this is where we originally budgeted $200,000 for domestic water boiler replacements. This number will have to come down once we do the emergency work at the high school this year. Again, another $102,000 in paving at Upper Dublin High School. And then we'll be looking at replacing the wooden interior doors to make them match with what we have at Fort Washington. That would be for both Jarretttown and Thomas Fitzwater. We would update the interior doors and the locking systems at $80,000, and a fire alarm replacement for the administration building estimated at $50,000 for a total of $4.1 million in the 28-29 school year. Looking through the facility assessment again that we received from ICS, there are a lot of other projects that you will see on there. We don't consider those capital projects, but they were recommendations that we should make budgeting available for really what you call general maintenance that we do during the summers. They don't reach the capital project level, but we should account for these types of projects. And we started doing these last year and continue planning to do these in future years. So we have sidewalk repairs district-wide. Every year we're going to make allotments in our operating budget for this. Power washing the buildings. Again, we're going to go around, take the buildings that need it the most and budget for those within our operations. So we have carpeting and flooring district-wide that we should allot every year. Most of our, I think by the time we're finished with Jarretttown or Thomas Fitzwater's renovations, most of our asbestos tiles should be out of the district. It's all, we do inspect it, it's all in good condition. But again, making sure that's out every year. We pick rooms that have carpet that we've been going over to tile floor, where I think we're down to our last 3 rooms at Jarretttown. But then we're going to be at the point where the vinyl tile in our hallways is going to be time to be replaced. Again, it's not large-scale projects, but stuff we need to account for within our operating budget. Last year, we just did our first large-scale painting project. Went very well. We covered a lot of area within all the schools, and we're going to continue that project again. We went out for proposals last year from painting contractors. We were able to get much more work done, especially with having difficulty getting the summer labor that we used to be able to get. We're having less and less people looking for summer work. So we really had to find a way to get this work done. So budgeting for painting of building sections that need it the most is within our operations. And then landscaping and tree removal. We've been operating on a plan that we made several years ago where we started with all of our ash trees within the district where we knew we'd have to take them down. Learning how many we really had in the district was a very large number. I think we had over 200 trees in the district that we knew some within years will have to come down because of ash borers. So any landscaping improvements, tree removals, tree installations, again, all falls within our operating budget.
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Lesser. So I'll pick up here and just close out the presentation. So what you see here is Mr. Lesser went through a lot of the details of projects we know from the facility condition assessment that was done. There are some other large capital improvement that are we're calling future considerations that we need to continue to talk about. So Mr. Lesser talked a little about Jarretttown, and as part of the facility condition assessment, the renovation above the ceiling that we need to talk about there because we've got some old systems in the building. But similar to Thomas Fitzwater, where we're doing above the ceiling, we'll need to have larger discussions around Jarretttown and below the ceiling and Thomas Fitzwater below the ceiling. There's more work in those buildings beyond just above the ceiling type work. So there's more detailed discussions that we're going to need to be having about both of those buildings here in these meetings. And then the transportation facility is obviously the other one. We've been talking about that for a few years now. And in March of 2023, we discussed it in great detail at the Finance Committee meeting. And the Finance Committee tasked the administration with doing two things at that meeting: working with ICS and our great professionals there to develop a conceptual plan for the 309 site here, and then also to engage a real estate agent to evaluate other potential properties in the township for the facility. Both of these items have reached a completion point at this point. So what we will be doing, we'll be bringing a presentation to the January Finance Committee meeting next month to provide a report on the status of all that work that's been done and a recommendation on how to proceed. The other thing we intend to do is, as part of that, it'll be at the January Finance Committee meeting. We will also intend on sending out a communication to our community to make them aware that this will be a topic of conversation at that meeting. So much more to come on that item. Funding overview, just very quickly, we've talked about this a number of times, but you can see that what Mr. Lesser talked about tonight is over the next 5 years, we've identified $32.7 million of capital projects that we need to consider doing to keep our facilities in good working order. We can fund capital projects in one of two ways. We can have cash reserves in our capital reserve account, and we can earn interest on those reserves, which we are in a positive position right now to be able to do that. We can also issue debt and have repayment with interest on that. And while I don't necessarily view debt as negative, there are certainly clear advantages of saving and funding projects with cash if possible. And we've been in kind of a very fortunate position to be able to do that. But if you look at the plan that we have here, and again, I know this is very small for a slide. There's also an attachment that's in board docs that has this where you can see it in more detail. You can see that based on where we're at with current funding that we have in our capital reserve fund, if we put not one more dollar in the fund to where we estimate we'll be at the end of this year, we will have all but $5.7 million to achieve the projects that Mr. Lester laid out in our capital plan. So we can't fully fund them with cash, but again, that assumes we don't put one more dollar into the capital reserve. I do also want to make clear that that excludes any funds that would be spent for the transportation facility or any additional projects at Jarretttown or Thomas Fitzwater below the ceiling. So it's also critical to note that this 5-year plan, there will continue to be additional capital items beyond that. It doesn't end 5 years from now. So every year we intend to bring a presentation like this back to this committee to talk about what we've achieved and sort of pick up that extra year and make sure nothing's changed, because again, things will change along the way. So we'll continue to do this. And then this is just a reference slide. There's notes on this slide that reference kind of where the numbers came from. That's just a reference slide here. So tonight, this presentation was very much informational. We're not asking the committee to move anything forward to the board to approve on Monday night. So certainly not having a quorum is not a major issue here, but
that's our plan that we've got drafted right now. And I thank Mr. Lester and certainly our team at ICS for assisting. So what questions can we answer?
Jenna.
Okay, so I have a few. So first of all, I think this is a really great, kind of rhythm for us to get into, to have these kind of 5-year presentations, because we do have a lot of things coming up. And I do think this, helps explain the narrative that we've been talking about in our budgeting process about the need to put funds aside toward the capital reserve to pay for these things, because I agree, being able to pay for as much as possible with cash, clearly it's a no-brainer where possible. So couple comments on the actual presentation. For when we, bring this back and we talk about it further, if we could on the paving item, because there's a lot of entries on here for paving. And I think they were almost all at the high school. If we could just say like what we're paving, I just think that would help, because when you see paving over and over, begs the question, how do we even have that much to pave? But I know it's a big facility. The other comment I have is about Jarretttown. And we've been, kind of sort of teasing this topic for a while, that we do have to, at some point, make a decision about what's the long-term strategy for Jarretttown. And we really have not had that discussion really at all. But I think something that would be helpful is, because there are several items on here related to Jarretttown that feel like longer-term fixes, getting a sense for which of these, because clearly, and nobody panic when I say this, even if we were to decide we're gonna, build a new Jarretttown, right? That's gonna take a long time, and there's probably some of these things that we would need in the interim. So that would help me to get a sense of which of these are so important that we would need to do them regardless, and which of these, if we were gonna do some kind of either large-scale renovation or new build, would you defer? So I think that would be helpful background for me anyway. And I had one more question. Give me a second here. Yeah, it's escaping me. So that's it for now.
All right, I'll add the comment, and I know both of you, said so also, but I'll say it a little stronger, that given the, looking at the long-term drawdown on the capital reserve, I am going to continue to say that I think it's really, really critical that we build into budgets every single year a planned transfer to capital reserve of approximately 1% of asset value. I know that this chart shows no transfers past last year. Last year. So, because we haven't actually formally made that transfer yet, which is why it says TBD, even though it is budgeted. But I'm comfortable saying, I feel so strongly about it, that I would like to see us in the future with a planned assumption that we will transfer every year, a planned transfer to capital reserve of approximately 1%. We know that that's not a guarantee, just like the rest of this chart. We know that there also is a budget surplus, which we have traditionally transferred, but I don't want to make the assumption that we will always have a budget surplus to transfer, or that we will always transfer any budget surplus that we have. I think it's much wiser to actually plan that transfer. And so, with the understanding that makes the picture of the graph you show in the budget process every year of expenses over revenues going out several years, that makes that look somewhat less advantageous. I just think it's so important that we should build that in going forward. So that's my only comment. Anything else from the rest of the board? Teacher.
Thank you. Two small questions. One about the fire alarm replacement for 25-26. It includes Fort Washington. Is there a reason that wasn't done in this past year?
When we started the work at Fort Washington, the fire alarms are in really good condition. We were under the impression that parts were still going to be made available. It was approximately we got to the end of the project, that our vendor that we use for this brand fire alarm sent notice out that the manufacturer will no longer be making parts, and we're going to have to do upgrades to those panels. And we went and researched our buildings, and 3 buildings unfortunately had that particular panel. While they're functioning, the devices are not a problem. We're lucky we do have some spare parts on hand. We know in the long term that we're going to need to make a decision now to replace them in their entirety, just because we won't have the parts to do simple maintenance on them anymore.
Okay, that makes sense. Where was it? On slide 10, it says interior door replacement. Is that a safety concern or is that a aesthetic? Or just because if it's a safety concern, I would say, why wait that long?
More of an aesthetic, operationally, the doors. We don't have any problems with doors locking. We are on that. All of our doors lock. We have keys, lock sets that work. They latch properly. This is more of an aesthetic, getting away from the all glass doors. It is a sturdier door. We'll say that, but. A security reason, no, we're not looking at that. We're looking more at an aesthetic reason to replace the doors. And just longevity, they're starting to wear out. We know that they're going to be due for replacement.
Thank you.
Jeff?
First of all, excuse me, thank you to the administration for putting this together. I mean, this is invaluable information as far as I'm concerned. I'm actually getting better, excuse me. Thank you for this. And going forward, updating this, I think, is going to be invaluable. The question I have, or the comment, it piggybacks a little on what Jenna said, and it's this. Early on, I think it's slide 3, Bob, you presented the EFCI extended condition infrastructure scale. And like using Jarretttown as an example, and like I said, this kind of ties into what Jenna said. I'm curious if we're able to, as we use this document, determine if we fix infrastructure systems X, Y, and Z, how much does that lower the assessment so we get either into a fair or a good condition for each building? Or I know it doesn't take into account educational evaluation of facilities, so it's a little bit of a chicken without the egg perhaps, but if there is a way to sort of, to Jenna's point, kind of direct what helps us for the infrastructure, what doesn't, that might be helpful going forward. It's just something to think about. I'm sure you are, but I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, I'm certain we can work with ICS. These are ICS's charts, and they have all the data that sits behind these things. I feel pretty good that we can do that, right? Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, Mary Beth.
I just need help with the second graph there. Like Jarretttown's in the middle, and the facility condition assessment, like is in the, oh, I see now. The green was throwing me off on the bars, but I see that it's in the worst condition of that list. It would be helpful to know a breakdown of what they're looking at, and if, like kind of what you were saying, the proposed renovations, if it would address what put us into the poor condition area.
Yeah, so as an example, if we're making recommendations to do an above the ceiling project at Jarretttown as an example, what impact would that have on this chart here? Where would it bring us to? So yeah, I certainly think we can do that. I don't know, Bill, you feel free to jump up and comment.
Yeah, Bill, I think it may be helpful just for our new board members and anyone else listening to just clarify how that chart is created.
Sure. So the EFCI, what that is the it's a comparison of the amount of dollars spent to address the need in the building versus what the cost of the new building is. So we take the square footage of the building, assume what the cost would be to build that new, and then take all the infrastructure work that we're recommending, what we feel is required, and that's the comparison. So the larger the bar, the closer the cost of renovating the building is to the cost of a new building. And at some point, it's like your car. When your car gets 15 years old, you're going to sink enough money into it that does it make sense to keep doing that when there's other parts that are going to wear out, when it may make sense to just buy a new car. So that's what that chart on the right is. So, to Jeff's point, yeah, when we dump money into that, that chart will be reassessed, and that any money you put into that will drop that bar down, but there's still going to be need there depending on what you don't address.
Did that answer the question? Yeah.
I kind of understood it as I was speaking. My other question would be like, Maple Glen is looking beautiful and is not that far behind Jarretttown. So they explained what the planned renovations are and things like that, but it's just interesting. So it would be helpful to know more what goes into that score.
We can certainly share the, make sure you have, you do have access, but you probably don't know where to look for the current, most recent facility condition assessment that has all the detail that goes into that. And, it's a good opportunity to highlight, it certainly isn't all about how it looks. The cost is mostly in the infrastructure. Any other comments? Jenna?
I think I'll just make a plug, and this piggybacks on something, a question Titia asked, which is, I think clearly if there's anything that is safety related, I know we talked about, I think it was at Jarretttown, a potential ADA related upgrade, but it sounded like it was for a portion of the building that we don't really use right now. It's in order to make it usable. So maybe that's not as critical, but I'll just make a plug. Safety, ADA, any of those things that are, to me, those are mission critical. So, and I'm sure preaching to the choir, but I'll say it for everybody's benefit anyway. Clearly, I think those need to come to the, rise to the top, and I'm sure they are.
All right, thank you all for the detail presented here. Look forward to this moving forward every year. And we have no specific action to take on it. So let's move on to item B, our vehicle purchase recommendation.
Yeah, so the next two items are going to be covered in the presentation we put together. Chris and I thought this was the best way to communicate this to you. So we have two items that we're going to cover tonight. We're going to stop between both of those items and certainly take questions. There's two items tonight. It's the recommendation to purchase vehicles to replace old vehicles, and it's per our vehicle replacement plan, which Chris will cover in detail. And then we're going to talk about the lease of our rented trailer office space at our 275 New Jersey Drive. So, Mr. Robbins, I will turn it over to you to cover our vehicle replacement strategy.
Okay. Back December 2022, we presented our fleet and facility update, which had outlined our vehicle replacement plan. This year, we are looking to replace two buses with 77 passenger vehicles, both gasoline vehicles. Both vehicles are well over 10 years old, which is ultimately the number in which we're looking to start replacing vehicles. Two 30-passenger vehicles, both, as you can see, well over, and one lift bus, same condition. And as I stated, the goal is ultimately to get us on a 10-year cycle. So here is an overview of what that cycle looks like. You'll also see that there's a van that we are looking to replace this year. We've already replaced the buses so far for this year, so these buses that we're presenting are for next year, just given the time that it takes to order and the manufacturers build those buses for us. That van for this year, we are really just waiting for availability so that we can finally replace it. We have not replaced it yet. So hopefully in the very near future, I will be back here in front of all of you with a recommendation for that. But as you see, as we move out, we're looking to replace diesel vehicles with gasoline vehicles. Right now, the reason for that is mainly just cost. It's a reduction on our carbon footprint on the environment, and again, trying to get cleaner. As we move forward to 2027, hopefully we will be able to look closer at replacing vehicles with EV technology.
And again, I will just add there that when we talk about EV, the facility that we're talking about developing would have the infrastructure. Right now, we don't have the ability to install the infrastructure at the facility that we lease, so that's not even an option for us. I know there's great interest from the board. There's interest from us as an administration to learn more about EV, but in our current facility that we have leased through June 30, 2026, it is not currently an option for us.
Correct. So again, you'll see as time goes on, the number of diesel vehicles will decrease. Gasoline will increase, and hopefully we find ourselves in a position where we can increase the number of EV vehicles that we have. Fortunately for our vans right now, everything's currently gasoline, which is where we're trying to go with all of our vehicles until EV is an option that we can explore. So the recommendation is to purchase from Brightbill Body Works 277 passenger vehicles at the cost of $258,000 each, 230 passenger buses at a cost of $97,000 each, and a lift bus at just over $100,000. And the funding source for this would be through capital reserve for the buses, and we use the general fund for the van, which, as I stated, hopefully I will be coming with that recommendation later on in the year.
We'll stop there and take questions on the recommendation for the vehicle purchase.
All right. Jenna, do you have any?
Not so much a question, but just, maybe a reminder. And so first of all, we do this every year, right? This is an annual exercise we go through for people who may be hearing this for the first time. So this is an annual thing we do. Again, it's another sort of drain on the capital reserve. So it ties into the topic we were talking about earlier, that the same fund that we use to pay for, renovations also is used to pay for our buses. And we're lucky to be able to do that sort of in cash, so to speak. The other sort of reminder is, again, as we continue to talk about potentially transitioning to EV, is we would still have needs for gas-powered buses for longer trips. That is just to sort of reassure folks that even if and when we transfer to EV, we're still going to need some of these gas-powered buses. So it's not as though, boom, all of a sudden, they're obsolete for longer field trips and sporting events and all that kind of stuff. So, but I really like the what slide was it on? The chart on slide 5, just kind of giving us a sense of where these activities would put us in the future. Again, sort of just like the conversation we had about the 5-year plan, I think having this kind of long-term strategy, putting it front and center, I think is a really good discipline that we're in, and I appreciate it. So just, I have one question then. So can you say again, for the vehicles that we're looking to replace, how many of them are diesel? Is it just the one bus, or was it both of the larger buses?
So it's both of the larger buses, and it is 2 of the mini buses.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for this. This is great.
All right, anyone else? Beat you.
Yeah, I too, I'm happy to see this slide 4 and 5 with the sort of planning out, especially sort of seeing that by 25 we might be at a point where we're maybe, well, that's maybe too optimistic, but one of our last purchases of gas-powered conventional buses. And, where's the slide that we're... Yes, on slide 6. I'm assuming a lift bus is a bus that has a lift in it. Why is that cheaper than a 77 passenger bus, or is it just a lot smaller?
So actually, it is a 30-passenger body, but it's equipped with a wheelchair lift for those students that need it.
All right, so there's just a 5,000 or roughly 5,000 difference because of the lift and
And body modification
yes,
as well.
yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mary Beth.
Are there hybrid buses available?
No, unfortunately not yet. They're still working on the EV technology. A hybrid wasn't really anything that any of the bus manufacturers have considered. I actually inquired about vans, and vans aren't ready yet for pupil transportation either.
I will highlight, you did mention this a year ago when you first presented it. If we look at the chart on slide 4, and I'm sure this will come up considerably more next month, but in 2025, as TTM mentioned, we're, potentially buying the last full-size conventional internal combustion bus. And that year, we also have only one bus to replace, and then we're at our 10-year goal. And then the following year, we have only 2 smaller buses, meaning less expense out of the capital reserve those 2 years, which dovetails potentially nicely if we do get off the ground finally on a transportation facility to have funds to help fund that construction while we're not buying 5 buses, we're buying 1 or 2. So so timing is an issue, but I'm sure we'll talk more about that next month. Anyone else have comments or questions on this? All right, we do have, or you want to wait to take action, or? You could do either. Yeah, I mean, we don't actually formally take action because there's only 2 of us, but you have asked for a recommendation to approve those bus purchases. I'm comfortable doing that. Jenna is nodding as well, but that will come next week at the legislative meeting. We will more formally present that because we can't formally make that recommendation tonight. So let's move on to the next item.
Yes, thank you. So the second item, and Mr. Robbins, you certainly don't have to stand there through it. I'll invite you back up if there's questions. I'll make you stand there the whole time. So the second transportation-related item is a recommendation related to our leased trailer on the premises of our leased transportation facility at 275 New Jersey Drive. So at the end of last year, we moved forward with another needed renewal of that leased facility. We're through June 30, 2026, we'll be there. If you've been to our facility, that facility provides garage space for maintenance on all of our vehicles. It provides garage space for storage of vehicle-related items. It provides parking for all of our vehicles. It provides parking for staff. What we do not have in that leased facility is office space. So since we moved in there in 2008, we've been leasing office space. So we have a trailer that we have there. And if you've ever been in that, I don't know how many folks in this room have been, it is a tiny space. We have usable space in our leased office space of 470 square feet at that location. So how that kind of breaks out, and we do have some pictures in here, it creates a very challenging environment for our department for a number of reasons. So here's Mr. Robbins' office here. When we look up at slide 10, you can see it's 100 square feet, which is certainly reasonable for a singular office space. So not much problem there. Again, just old and not in great shape. So here is where we start to run into some challenges in our current environment. So there's 2 office spaces in this leased trailer. Mr. Robbins has 1. The other one is a shared space by 3 staff members. So our department manager shares this space with a full-time administrative assistant with a part-time clerk in there. It is 140 square feet. And you can see how they're basically sitting on top of each other in that work, which is not great, especially for our department manager who does have responsibility for staff and needs to meet with them and talk to them about daily responsibilities, meetings, things like that. And then this is the shared office
not office space, the shared lobby space within there. So we have about 230 square feet, which needs to accommodate all 40 plus of our drivers, aides that come in there every day. They come in and pick up their keys for their vehicles. They drop them off at the end of the day. Their mailboxes are in there. So we have 40 people moving through this space multiple times per day because they're generally in there about the same time. So what we are looking at, tonight I'm supporting Mr. Robbins, and our recommendation is to move forward and sign a new lease with Will Scott, who we've had our lease with there, to essentially double the amount of square footage that we have for our office space. So we're in a single wide trailer. We're looking to expand to a double wide trailer for usable space. And what that would do for us is expand to 4 offices. So you would have, Mr. Robbins would have an office. Our department manager would now have an office, which would allow for confidential conversations with staff about job-related items. Then we'd have a shared office space for our full-time administrative assistant and part-time clerk, and then a small meeting room that they could actually have access to bring folks in, have meetings there, and for filing and storage. And it would also allow for a larger common space for our staff that access that building throughout the day on a daily basis. What that means as far as costs go, so if you look at our current office lease, we pay $15,672 per year for that office space. The new cost for a double wide facility would be just over $28,000. So we're looking at an annual increase of $12,400 or so dollars. It would also come with one-time costs. There are certainly costs to break down and remove the trailer that's there, deliver and install the new trailer. So those one-time costs would be around $20,000. And we would look for an anticipated delivery and installation date for over the spring break holiday. So it's obviously going to take some time and coordination to do that. But we believe that it's necessary to sort of make that change as soon as we can. We would also do our best. Right now, it's not lined up, but we're still working with Will Scott to see if we can adjust the timeline to line it up to the June 30, 2026 date, just to make sure everything is lined up together. The only other considerations, the other things we are doing, we've already spoken with the owner of 275 New Jersey Drive. Again, before we do anything on that property, we must have their authorization to do that. They have reviewed this and have signed off on this. We are still working with Upper Dublin Township to make sure we understand their entire permit and inspection process. We certainly have requirements there that we need to follow. It's certainly within reach. We just are still waiting for confirmation on what all of those items are. So the recommendation is to move forward with a new lease for the double wide trailer to expand from our single wide, and Mr. Robbins and I will be happy to answer questions if there are any.
So the thing that I think is not enumerated in the cost considerations is what's the difference. So if we were to continue to lease the current trailer or replace it with a single wide or whatever would be the thing that we would do, presumably we're not going to continue at the existing lease rate, or is this $15,672? Is that what it would be to renew the?
Yeah, we are. So what happens is they go on a month to month. So that would basically be the renewal option. So that's the rate we're currently paying for the existing lease.
So it doesn't escalate.
Not that we're aware of. I mean, they certainly could give us an escalation. We didn't get a price for that. We just compared it to our current costs. So there is potential for it to go up slightly, but it would probably stay relatively close to that number.
All right, any other comments or questions, starting with Jenna?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the additional rent, essentially, it's about $1,000 a month, right? So, and look, looking at this, I've seen the facility. I have never gone in this trailer. This is not a facility that I'm candidly, proud to have our folks work in. So I hear the need loud and clear. I'm also sensitive to the fact that we do still have a bus driver shortage going on. And I think, what we can do in the interim while we continue to discuss the transportation facility to give them, as nice a facility as we can in the interim, I think is important. So again, this is still critical infrastructure. I know it's not, you know, kind of the things that you think about with schools, right? Classrooms and supplies and, you know, all the fun things that go into actual education. But I think it's still a pretty critical piece of infrastructure that we are legally required to provide. So, you know, I'm supportive of this. Again, it just, for me, continues to drive home that we need to come to a resolution at some point about what we're doing with the long-term facility. But yeah, this looks pretty cramped.
I just want to make a slight clarification to that comment on the legally required to provide. So public school districts are not actually legally required to provide transportation services to their students. But if we're going to provide, I think your point was if we are going to choose to provide transportation to our students, there's a certain, you know, maybe perhaps minimum standard that we would want to meet.
Well, it's not even just, what I was referring to is not even just for our students. We have, for students going to our schools, right? To your point, if we're providing transportation for our own students, which I can't ever envision not doing, we also have to provide transportation, you know, to any other students in our borders who, you know, go to private school, et cetera. So, I mean, this is, unless we're going to all of a sudden say we're not busing our own students, which again, I cannot fathom ever getting there. It's, in my view, it's basically a legal requirement, so.
All right, any other comments or questions, Titia?
Yeah, with the need for office space, is there any other space in the, I mean, or is it essential for these people to be on site, I think is my question, with our ability to have more remote things. Do all these people need to be in that trailer?
Absolutely. One of the pitfalls of it, my previous district, we parked our buses remotely. You don't have eyes on that driver to know whether or not that driver is safe to operate that school bus that is essentially going to have up to 150 students on it that morning or that afternoon. So being able to see the drivers, have that interaction with them just for safety reasons is ideal. You know, I think that having a place where you can see the drivers is in the best interest of the district.
Mary Beth.
I'm just wondering, because it's going to be a lot of lead time in terms of building a facility, would it make more sense to purchase a trailer?
Have you looked into that at all?
We have not looked into that as an option.
We could discuss
I mean, we could ask that question. I don't know what we would do with it when we're done. I mean, it's a question that we have not explored, just to be perfectly honest. So I don't know the answer to that
discussion.
If there's an interest in us doing that and delaying this, I mean, we could certainly do that, but we haven't.
My instinct on that, obviously without having done the research or seeing actual numbers, is that if we're talking about purchasing a trailer for a couple of years until we have a facility of our own, and then having to do something with it once we do have a facility of our own, the difference in total cost is probably not a lot. I mean, I don't see any harm in asking the question, just to explore the idea, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a significant decision factor in terms of, our long-term plans. Jenna?
I don't know how difficult that would be to research, but it might be helpful if you had a ballpark, since we can't make a recommendation formally tonight anyway. If it's something you could give us a ballpark on by Monday, that I think would be helpful, yeah.
Jeff, did you have something? Yeah, you. All right. Anyone else? Okay, so again, thank you both. We do have a recommendation that to go ahead with this lease. It sounds like we'll look forward to maybe some additional information next week, and we'll more formally discuss this item at the legislative meeting. Guess we can't make a recommendation tonight. So moving on to items, that was item C. Moving on to item D, SRMS change order.
Yes, this should be a quick item. So this is a change order that was approved in October when Dewey, Zach was here to present it. This is related to the work that we're doing on the solar panels on the roof of Sandy Run. So at the time we were moving this forward, I raised some questions after reviewing the change order about sales tax being included in the quote. At that time, it was critical to approve it so we could get the items ordered and get this moving forward. But I also continued to press on the fact that there was sales tax included on the cost estimates. And after pushing on this with Dewey and with Borough, we asked for confirmation from the state. There are some reasons why equipment is sales tax exempt and others where it's not sales tax exempt when it comes to construction of buildings. This turned out it was and is sales tax exempt. So this change order reflects the lower cost of, it's lowered to $145,207.36. It was reduced by a little over $6,600 from the prior change order. So the other change order is being replaced with this change order, and obviously the recommendation is to continue to move forward with this. As a matter of information, we still do not have a timeline from Dewey on when this work will be completed, and we continue to ask on a every other week basis because we still don't know when the solar panels on the roof of that building will be activated. So that's just an aside.
All right, I appreciate the work to continue to pursue this. Because this is a change order, we would need to approve this at a legislative meeting, even though it is a revision of an existing change order in our favor. But we can't do that tonight, so we'll discuss it further. But before that, any comments or questions? I know Jeff has one.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I just wanted everyone to know that consistent with the position I took last month when we had the borough change order, I'm going to abstain from this vote just to avoid any appearance of impropriety given my professional relationship with borough developers that has nothing whatsoever to do with Sandy Run. But I will abstain whenever this comes up to a vote, for example, Monday night.
Any other comments or questions? Right, thank you. Moving on to our disposal of excess obsolete equipment, a regular monthly item, which includes buses and vans this month. Any comments?
Yeah, I will just note with this one, since this is a little different than our typical items that are on here. So again, Mr. Robbins, he presented his vehicle replacement plan tonight and the strategy to buy new vehicles. As we do that, we are disposing of old vehicles. We will continue to use, or the recommendation is to continue to use 422 sales. We did that last year with 10 vehicles. It was extremely successful for us. Again, not a ton of money, but it was better than scrap value or what we were offered to trade in the vehicles. So we'll continue to move forward with that unless there are concerns.
Not at all. I do recall the last time we did this, the buses that were to be sold ended up sitting on the front of the lot for quite some time. Will that be the pattern going forward if we continue to do this?
No, so this time the holdup was we had applied for an EPA grant for electric buses, and we needed to wait for the EPA to decide whether or not they were going to award us the grant or not. They did not, so that's why we're just now moving them forward rather than in the first meeting in August. So that's the only holdup there.
All right, thanks for that clarification. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we'll see this again next week. Monthly financial reports.
Yeah, we've covered a lot tonight, so there's not a ton to cover on the monthly financials. I will just note that, again, nothing has changed significantly from last month. So our receipts are still very much in line with prior year, 80% to 81%. That is receipts against our approved budget. We continue to trend positively in the areas we've been talking about, interim real estate taxes, interest on investments. Again, if anyone's saw the news today, the Fed held rates steady and talked about 3 interest rate reductions in 2024. So
just keep paying attention to that. And then other financing sources related to our insurance proceeds that were received. Expenses, again, remain in line at 36% expended year to date as compared to 36% in the prior year. So right on there. On the other financial reports, I just want to note that the real estate assessed value tracking sheet is not updated. It is the same as the prior month. We have not yet received that report from the county. This seems to be the time of year where there is regularly a delay in us receiving that. So that is exactly the same as last month, and that is why. And EIT continues to trend strong earned income tax compared to prior years. Similar to when we start doing budget presentations, when we do revenue in March, I have already reached out to Berkheimer to give us a projection for this year and then to give us a projection for next year as well. I've also asked if they have any information that can tell us why it's trending so much more positively than what they projected for this year to be. So everything continues to be in line and in control with our financials. And if there's any questions about any specific items, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any comments or questions on the monthly financial reports? Right. All continues to look promising, and we'll see that again next week. And is there anything to tell us about in the budgetary transfers?
Nothing specific to highlight, but happy to answer questions.
Anyone have questions on the budgetary transfers? Okay, so we'll see those again next week. A contract extension for US Foods.
Yeah, so if anyone that was here 2 years ago, Mrs. Deli came before the committee and reviewed her request for proposal process that she went through for grocery and distribution for the food service department. She also is the lead for a number of other districts in our area that piggybacks off of our contract that we have in place. So she is doing a fantastic job there. If you remember, the original agreement from that request for a proposal was approved in March of 2022, and it was for a 1-year period from July 22 through June 30, 2023. There were 4 optional extension years that were allowable under the agreement terms. To date, based on Mrs. Deli and her conversations with other folks that participate, they are happy with the work that US Foods is doing for us. So she is recommending a second 1-year extension. So this would be the second of 4 that would be available. This would be for July 1, 2024 to June 30, 2025. It is important that we're doing this now because per the agreement, we only have until January 15th each year mutually. So we need to approve it. US Foods need to approve it by January 15th of each year to have that in place for the following year. So I support Mrs. Deli's recommendation to extend this contract for the third year, the second extension.
Any comments or questions on that, Jenna?
Just a question. Is there an actual contract here that we need to review? There isn't one attached, and I tried to go back and look. I don't think I remember seeing an actual contract for this formally.
So all the terms were out of the request for the RFP, correct?
Yep. Yeah, because I saw there was an RFP, but I didn't see an actual contract. So I guess my only request would be if there is a contract we're signing, I think typically we would see that. So if there is one, to just bring it to Monday.
Or we will attach the RFP to Monday, so you have that.
Yep.
All right, just to clarify, either way, a year ago, we did approve the language of it, and this is no change in the language, although of course we could, since it was only a year, we could choose not to if we chose to. But so we'll see this again next week, and let's move on to the Eastern budget.
Yeah, so Eastern, each year, every member school district of Eastern Center for Arts and Technology is required to take action on their budget for the upcoming year. So the budget before us is the 2024-2025 budget from Eastern. The process that Eastern goes through is they review and receive approval on their budget from member district superintendents and its joint operating committee. And after approval at that level, which it's already gone through, every member district receives a copy and is asked to review and take action on it. I've provided their budget proposal memo and budget document as attachments to the agenda item. I'm only going to cover the highlights, and certainly if there's any questions that I'm not able to answer, typically we would have had Dr. Levinowitz, who was on the Joint Operating Committee, join us as well and could answer questions. But if there are any detail, I'll be happy to reach out to Dr. Plesnarski there to get further information. So the key highlights, their proposed budget includes an overall 4% increase for district operating assessments, yielding a 3.51% increase when considering their capital assessments. So operating expenses are divided among the participating school districts in the same proportion as the average daily membership of students enrolled from the district for the 3 school years immediately preceding the upcoming budget year. So our allocation, Upper Dublin's allocation, is $689,631, which is an increase of a little over $74,000 or 12.1%. This is consistent with our average ADM increase of 6 students or 10.7%. Our current year total enrollment at Eastern is 56, and the 3-year average is 55. And this is an increase from 32 in the 2019-2020 school year. So we've seen significant increase in the number of students that are participating in Eastern's programs. In addition to the operating budget, Eastern is continuing its plan to fund a 10-year capital plan, similar to what we spoke about tonight, to maintain its facilities. Funding of a capital plan was something new that was introduced as part of their 2020-21 budget. Page 27 of their budget provides more details on that. In the current year, their request is $1,050,000 spread across all 9 member districts. Our portion is a little over $158,000. And in order to continue funding their plan, they are asking for the same amount in the 24-25 year. Our portion of that would be slightly increased to $160,484. The capital while the operating budget is based on enrollment, the capital contribution that we pay and all districts pay is based strictly on the STEB value, which is connected to the value of real estate in each district. So even if we had no students attending Eastern, we would still have a requirement to approve and pay that portion of the budget. So the proposed budget for the 24-25 Eastern budget projects our costs at a little over $850,000 compared to $773 current year, $76,000 increase. This increase was already known and planned for in the preliminary budget that we reviewed last month. Again, they were still working through it, but we had an estimate of the cost, and it's what we estimated and put in the budget for last month. So happy to answer questions, and again, happy if I can't answer them to take them back to Eastern and Dr. Plesnarski.
All right, thanks. Yeah, 2 things I want to add. You mentioned Dr. Levinowitz was our long-term representative on that board, president of that board for approximately forever. And our new representative is Jen Ionity, who is not here tonight because she is at an Eastern meeting. So she's not here to answer questions either if she was even able. I believe it's her first one. Actually, it must be her first one. Had another thing I was going to, I'm thrilled to see, we see a continuing growth in the number of students we're sending to Eastern, which is great news. I mean, it does increase our share of the budget, but that's all good. And a big portion of that credit goes to the change of the high school schedule, which really facilitates the opportunity for more students. But there's also been a continued effort to broaden our reach and try to increase the number of students who are interested. So the more we continue to drive that up, that's all great news if we can. Our share, while growing, is still below average for the 8 sending districts relative to our size. So I think there's still room to grow in the number of students we're sending to Eastern. Any other comments or questions on this? All right, so we'll have further discussion on that next week at the legislative meeting, and our last regular recommendation item is a settlement stipulation.
This is a district-initiated appeal at 425 Delaware Avenue. Again, we have reviewed it with our solicitor, and we feel like this is a reasonable resolution. It results in an increase for the district of a little over $9,000 for the current year and $5,075 for the next tax year and moving forward, again, not counting in changes in millage rates or assessed value in the future.
Comments or questions? All right, so we'll move that one. Well, we will discuss that again next week. So we are up in our agenda to public participation. Before we jump into that, there were some questions that came up last week regarding the process and procedures around public participation. As a reminder, we do have some of those rules listed right in the agenda as per our board operating guideline 006. Those rules were developed in large part to satisfy the requirements of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act. One of the requirements in the Sunshine Act, Section 706, is that the minutes must contain the names of all citizens who appeared officially. And that's exactly how it's worded, the names of all citizens. There was a question last week about whether that meant full name or what that meant. So for now, until we have further clarity, we will, at least I as the presiding officer for this meeting, and going forward, I expect until we perhaps revisit 006 at a policy committee meeting, we will interpret that to mean, at least to mean your full name so that we can put that in the minutes. And Ms. Evans is certainly, sounds like appreciative to have that. Because she's the one who prepares our minutes. Certainly bonus points if you want to spell it for her so she gets it right. So with that, anyone who would like to address the committee or the rest of the board, please come up to the mic, state your name, what part of the township you're from, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota and members of the board. My name is Ed Kovler. That's Kovler. I happen to be a proud member of this community. Not afraid to share my name, and welcome anyone who. But I thought it was important to respond to Missy Barbia's comments to make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Missy Barbia called this a moment. This is not a moment. Her post of that anti-Semitic webinar and the people she promotes with her conferences are anti-Semitic. It's disgusting and has absolutely no place anywhere, especially in my community, the Upper Dublin School District. Missy Barbia stated that we have one story about her and had to dig through her social media to find it. First of all, finding this information was easy. She made it easy for us. She posted it. We didn't have to dig. It was there. It was her choice to post this. No one sought this out. In fact, if she didn't post it, we never would have learned about it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kovler, but briefly, the purpose of public participation is to address the board on things that we may take action on in the future.
I'm getting to it.
Okay.
I'm definitely getting to it. As for, and the reason why this is important is, again, we don't want history to repeat itself, right? I want to make sure that it's clear that we are going to stay on top of this. And I lost about 20 seconds there for the record. She still has yet to acknowledge, Missy Barbia said that we selected details about her making her guilty by association. Her associates include people that have said or posted anti-Semitic language. She's hosting an event in Boston in January. The main purpose she brought in for this conference, or the main person she brought in for this conference, is a noted anti-Semite, Autumn Allen, who has called for the elimination of Israel. She wanted to see this through for those who voted for her. Democrats who I have met through this process have told me time and again that they can't believe they voted for her. They regret it. Jenny Anderson and her associate, Chris Pasteur of the Upper Dublin Democratic Committee, need to do better. This is the second time that their choice for a school board member dropped out. One during the election a couple years ago, and now Missy Barbia. Missy Barbia stated that the voices at the last two meetings have been largely one-sided. This is an open session. 28 people have spoken at these last two meetings. 3 people have supported her, and 1 was herself. The other 2 came across as members of Hamas. Missy Barvia acknowledged that some were offended, but said that they still wanted her to serve. Not one person I met who was offended would want her to serve. They all wanted her out, even the people that voted for her. Missy Barvia mentioned that DEI was referred to as woke culture, cancel culture. After watching the webinar promoted by Missy Barvia, it was made clear to me that under the guise of DEI, which does have good intentions, these anti-Semites want to implement their propaganda in K-12 curriculum. Missy Barvia stated that there's other perspectives in this community. I'm hopeful that she does heed to her words and focus on inclusion. Finding a random Jewish quote will not fill the gaps and help her with her education about the Jewish people or Israel. In the case of Israel, there is only Zionism or anti-Semitism. If you want to criticize the government of Israel, fine. You're free to do that, just like you are in this country. But please, don't include an entire religion in your criticism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, Ms. Barvia left this meeting early and did not care to listen to other perspectives. Missy Barvia ended her speech by quoting Rabbi Sharon Brous, who defines her congregation as non-denominational Jewish. I don't even know what that is. I'm Jewish. I never heard of such a thing. I mean, this room was filled with 50 or so Jewish people at the last meeting and the meeting before that. She refused to use their feedback in her quote. And thank you for giving me the extra 20 seconds. I'd like to ask, I'm skipping here, unfortunately. I'd like to ask the board if you will seek a replacement. If so, what is the process? Given the current climate of anti-Semitism between this whole situation, the writing on the bathroom wall, will the board consider including members of the community in the search? Thank you.
Caitlin Comfort Johnson, and I am from Ambler. And I just have a few questions, and I actually am piggybacking on what the gentleman just said. I was just curious about what the process would be for the new board member. Would we be doing interviews like we've done in the past, and we would be able to see all of that happen in front of us? Or would you be picking like the next highest person who was just voted for recently from the election? I don't know, I'm just curious. You were also talking a lot about the different facilities, and I was just curious if Fort Washington's renovations and all that was going on was considered done, or is there more that will be finished this summer? Like right now, when you look at the fields, like the fields are kind of flooded and the kids can't play so on the grass. So I'm just curious if that's something that's just not done yet, or how that goes. Another question was about the buses, and you were saying that you wanted to change them every 10 years. I was just curious because when you looked at the chart, there was a lot of buses that seemed to be lasting for 16 years or 14 years. I was just curious how you came about with 10. Is that having to do with just cost versus maintenance, or should that number be extended? 12, 13? I don't know. Just a question. I don't know much about buses. And then my last question was, oh good, I have 2 minutes, was about the meeting that Mr. Leckman was talking about, saying in January. Did you have the date for when you were going to give your 2 options about what you recommended? And I was also curious about the bus depot or transportation facility. And I was just curious, would that be like an open forum situation where the community could actually feel like they're being heard and actually have a sway in what decision goes either way? Or is it kind of like now where you guys tell us all you want to share, we ask questions, and then you kind of pick and choose how you reply? All right, thank you.
Ada Brister, Fort Washington. Mark, I totally appreciate that you did clarify that we, and anyone who speaks at public participation, should be giving their full name. I thought that was totally self-evident last week, but no board member clarified it at the time when it needed to be clarified. That little situation where two people spoke who refused to give their last name ended up causing a lot of chaos in the room. So that's just so basic. I mean, I just don't even understand why that was allowed. They should have, basically, Titia, you were running the meeting temporarily. You should have said full name or sit down. Thank you very much. All right, I don't want to dwell too much on Ms. Ebarbier, but I will say a few things. And I may be repeating myself from last week. Her comment, first of all, her apology was a non-apology. That was part of what upset me. I was initially upset by what I saw people posted, Facebook page. You know, it was not a tagged post. It was a post that she shared. Then when people said you shared a very offensive, hurtful, anti-Israel, propaganda-filled webinar, she then said, I didn't share it. So the lack of honesty really bothered me from the beginning. I think that led to a lot of hurt in the community. And I feel that tonight she did do the right thing by resigning, because there is a lot of work to do in any school district. There's a whole lot of work I feel there is to do in Upper Dublin. I do hope that I can, over the course of maybe several meetings, I want to bring up things to the new superintendent at the meeting so that the board can hear it too, that do not cost much money at all to help improve this district. Because you're always, I get it that you have to be focused on the money. I want you to be focused on the money, especially our tax dollars. But there are, you know, you could pick the brain of the people who are in this room tonight, and there's many things that this district could do by next week to improve what's the experience for children in this district that does not cost much money. A couple of things I just want to follow up that I brought up last week. Well, somebody else did bring it up tonight. The anti-Semitic graffiti. There was it's not a high school principal's fault that there's graffiti or a superintendent's fault. It is, though, when the communication to the parents does not happen in a timely way. And people who had firsthand experience last week said it took 7 days to hear from the high school principal, who I think is a great guy, but why 7 days? No one responded to that last week. The book, The Diary of a Young Girl, is called Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. I've read it. I'm sure many of you read it. It was in our curriculum. It's a great book. I used to happen to be an 8th grade middle school teacher, mostly language arts, social studies. I mean, I don't think there's too many people that would disagree that it's a great book. You heard a parent speak last week after I spoke that said they thought it was such an important book that they bought copies for the middle school. And the mother didn't say this, so I could be wrong, but I think that was partly in response to an anti-Semitic incident that had happened in our middle school. But that book is gone. You know, if you can't answer it tonight, can you answer at some point why, and would you consider bringing it back? Last but not least, since my time's running out, most of the board indicated last week that you were totally open to the idea of anti-bias training. So since you said you were willing, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? How would you go about picking who would lead that anti-bias training? I assume it would be handled like an educational conference. It would obviously be out of the public eye, I think, but you would have to discuss it and vote on the mechanics of getting to that point. Thank you.
Glasses on, yeah. Jenny Vitale Ambler with my both glasses on so I can see everything. So first, I want to just say we spoke extensively about process, about replacing a school board member, and one of the things that came out to me loud and clear was, well, yes, we would try to have interviews if there was time allotted, if there's special exceptions like 3 weeks, blah, blah, blah. And there was a focus, and it was an interesting focus, of we would consider the person who had the next most votes because the community chose those people, and not just a small, dark-filled room of selected people that we have no idea who it is, picking people. And ironically, we did just have an election, and the person who got the next most votes, Ann Hoffman, has over 3,000 votes from the Upper Dublin community. I believe, I've been told, and I haven't clarified it officially, that she is actually Jewish. And I think that would be a fantastic statement to the community that, yes, the next most votes means something to this community, and someone who is Jewish at this time is even more impactful. The only thing that the district would say that's against her, like with me, is the wrong letter after their name, which is why our board and our school district and our township have gotten so political. That's what I'm going to say about that. The softball field. Having a softball player, seeing the debacle at Sandy Run Middle School softball field, I think we go for. I have spent so many years on coming to these meetings, more than most here actually, and I feel like we do a lot of piecemeal, or we just like Band-Aid things and we move on. And if the softball field is ready to get done and we finally committed to do it, just spend $150,000 extra and do it right and do it well and do the job, and it'll last a long time. And including, the JV field. All those things are important. The backstop is important, the dugout, everything else. Especially when we consider Fort Washington area and the batting cages down there that would be destructed, would be interfered with a ridiculous bus depot there. Yeah, a good batting cage would be nice. Actually, fixing the batting cages by the Field of Dreams would be also nice. I think it's also important that we prioritize our buildings. Jarretttown is old. It needs work. Let's do it. Let's work on that building. Why are we worried about spending $10 million on a transportation facility, which I hate that word, it's a bus depot. Bus depot, when poor, Chris, I feel terrible. They've lived in this crappy trailer for 15 years. 15 years they've been there. And we made this mistake when we built that high school. Let's not make another one, building a building where a lot of people are against the location. It's destroying open space, wetlands, and that part is used. I was at anecdotally, I know, Mark, we worry about that. Anecdotally, I was at the post office, and I was coming out at about 10:09. Now, Fort Washington has not started school. The kids are still arriving by bus, by parents, by car line, everything else. And 4 buses passed me to come back to the transportation facility. So don't tell me that during school at 9 o'clock in the morning that there's no buses coming in at that point. The kids would already be in school because some routes end earlier than others. So that's that. Also, during the election, it was very upsetting to hear anecdotally again that the bus depot was a done deal and that that the excuse is we don't want to waste more of your money to buy a land property. And that is an infuriating statement to me because I think we haven't done much to do the right thing in terms of saving money. We've wasted over $400,000 a year for 15 years on a transportation area for these people when it should have been done with the high school. And it also worries me from the township side that somehow we're trying to circumvent zoning exceptions because you would need them to get this spot there. You need them because it's not zoned at the moment properly. So I hope that's not all true, and I hope it's not a done deal. And I think it is important and imperative that a thing this big with this amount of money and how many people are so upset about it and fought against it now 3 times and still worry about it, that it deserves a town hall meeting in and of itself. Thank you.
Jason Zaroff, Drescher, parent, taxpayer, angry resident. First of all, I'd like all of you to actually give me some eye contact. You didn't do it for the other speakers that came up here, and I thought that was considerably rude that you all sat and looked at your laptops. Come on, we're here for a reason. First of which, I don't really consider your lack of transparency really in good favor right now. I mean, you had this meeting where most residents didn't even know you were having it this evening. Quietly appointed Ms. Barvia last night. Yes, she resigned today, but you still did it behind everybody's back. So quite frankly, I don't think any of you are best suited in our interest to appoint the next person. I think we should have an election. And quite frankly, I don't want a committee. I want an actual game plan about what you guys are going to do before the end of this meeting. You want us to talk about what you should be doing? That's an idea that should be going about right now, because it's not fair to the community. You guys had your chance to have someone represent us, and you swept it under the rug. How is that fair that we should let you do it again? I don't trust you. I don't trust any of you as far as I could throw you. I mean, you took someone that's completely against a part of our community, and you thought it was acceptable. How? And for the other thing, I'd like to know about the buses. I want to know, are they going to have seatbelts on them? Because I'm curious to know how many students are going to be on said buses. Are we going to cram kids on? Are we going to cut back on that? Because I haven't really seen how this budget comes into play here. Like a little more transparency about that. I mean, I know back in the day when I was a child, yes, we didn't have seatbelts, but quite frankly, that doesn't justify why it shouldn't be there now. But if a bus hits something, I don't want kids going flying through a bus. I don't care if the seat above them is bigger than them. It's not indestructible. So these are things also I think I really need to be considered about. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. I would like to know your game plan about what you're going to do about the next director and how us as a people have involvement in the say of that. Thank you.
Irina Toiberman, Maple Glen. That's Irina. A lot of people get that wrong. But anyway, I wasn't planning to be here tonight. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but I felt, an obligation to do so. Ms. Sabarvia did resign. She did the right thing, and we appreciate it. And I appreciate that it was not an easy decision for her to make. But the fact is, she lost a lot of trust in this community, and by extension, clearly, the rest of the board has lost a lot of trust as well. A lot of people spoke, but I want you to know that so many people reached out to me after last week's meeting, and those people thanked me for speaking, thanked other people for speaking, and they said, they wish they had the courage to speak. A lot of people just do not like public speaking. I don't like public speaking. A lot of people were afraid of retribution from teachers, from other students. That is something that has on many occasions crossed my mind, but I feel like this is something too important not to talk about. And a lot of people have kids that are friends with Ms. Sabarvia's children, and they showed Ms. Sabarvia a kindness that she did not show our children. We will not allow her to play the victim card. We just will not. Our views are absolutely one-sided. They're on the side of our children, and that's where everybody's views should be. I want to take this opportunity to remind the board that their obligation is to this community, which, by the way, is largely Jewish. You do not get to have a public opinion on international politics. You do not, especially not when the spread of those opinions, and a lot of the times false claims, contributes to anti-Semitism here in the United States and here in Upper Dublin. You do not get to do that, not when you are representing our children. Since the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, hate crimes in the United States have gone up 400%. 400%. Jews, 2% of the US population, and they account for 60% of hate crimes. So spreading those messages is dangerous. It's not talking about international politics. It is dangerous to the children of this community. And you all need to understand that. This was not about disagreeing with Ms. Sabarvia's point of view. It was not. It was quite literally about the safety of our children, and I would like you all to keep that in mind. This is the beginning. It is not the end. The last few weeks have shown us that there is work to be done here in Upper Dublin. We have a lot of work to do as a community, and
we will be looking to the board for your steady and responsible leadership. And please don't take that for granted. Please understand that what you do matters. Your voices matter, and I hope the individuals that are not here today will hear this, because we expect a lot more. What transpired these past few weeks cannot continue to happen. Thank you.
All right, seeing nobody else coming to the microphone, I will close this opportunity for public participation. I will also state we did have no comments submitted electronically for this meeting. And we'll see if there are responses from the committee, rest of the board, or the administration on any of these things. I have a couple, but do you have?
Yeah, I have a few. So let me start with the process for the replacement board member. We can't have an election. It's not something that we are entitled to do under the law, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's just not an option that's available to us. The law provides that we have to pick somebody. Now, the process we use for that is up to us, right? But we can't, we can't have, an election the way that folks are accustomed to elections. So the other thing to bring up about the replacement is we only have 30 days from today. So it's going to have to be a quick process. I personally, I'll just speak for myself. I'm in favor of all options. I think that, we should absolutely hear from people who are interested, but we have to be really sensitive to the timing. We are required under law to fill this seat within 30 days. So I've heard the topic of an election coming up before. It's just not something that, A, we don't have time to do it, but B, it's not available to a school board. We can't run an election. So I'm responding to your comments. The other comment that was made, there was a implication, for lack of a better word, that we had something to do with this. We swept this under the rug. We didn't have anything to do with this. The voters of the township voted for Ms. Abarvia. We do not have the power, did not have the power to remove her. It's a moot point at this point, but I think that's a point that's worth making. I do think it is unfair to blame people on this board for comments that Ms. Abarvia made. Again, I think that rhetoric that we swept things under the rug, there's some conspiracy theory, conspiracy happening here, is unfair. But I do understand, and I'm very sensitive, as I've said several times, to the comments that people have made about the way that this impacted them, the hurt that they felt, the trust that they've lost. And, speaking for myself, but again, I imagine many of my colleagues feel the same way, we're going to do what we can to rebuild that trust with the community. All that we can do, I think, at this point is ask for your grace to allow us to do that. But again, it's something that's going to take time, and I recognize that. Let's see. There's some comments. I think there's some comments that the administration will have to respond to. This has come up before about people criticizing taking notes. The reason I take notes is so that I can do this right now and respond as I can kind of track the comments and respond to them as best we can. That's not meant to be disrespectful. It's actually quite the opposite. I'm trying to make sure I capture what everybody said. Let's see, what else? You
No,
can't,
I'm sorry.
sir.
I'm sorry, you can't. You may not. Calling this to order, you may not comment at this time. This is the board's time to talk. That's how this works.
Let's see. I'm going to go back through my notes as other people are talking, but that's what I have for now.
Okay, I have a couple as well. On the process for the new board member, to be clear, we found out about this evening. So we don't have a plan. We haven't talked about a plan. We don't, so we're not going to be able to share a plan during this meeting. But obviously, time is of the essence. We have a limited opportunity. It's certainly the preference, and I really can only speak for myself because, again, we haven't discussed this. It's certainly the preference to discuss the process by which we would fill a seat at a public meeting amongst the whole board. Whether we actually have the time to do that in this case is not clear, because we're going to lose the entire holiday, winter break part of the time. So I hope we can do that. We'd have to call a special meeting to discuss it in public. If we were going to do that, we'd have to do that super quickly. We could potentially do it next week as part of the legislative, but we haven't talked about it. So I don't know what the process is going to be. My preference is certainly to solicit applications and interview people, which would have to be done in public if we choose to use that method. So there's only so many methods allowed to us. As Jenna was saying, we are obligated to fill the seat. We cannot call an election. It is up. We can just appoint somebody, or we can do interviews. If we do any of that stuff, it has to be done in public, so we'd have to call a special meeting to do that. Because, well, I guess we do have committee meetings at the very beginning of January, but that's already going to be a long night. Probably it would have to be its own night. So again, there's a lot to figure out on how we're going to do that. I apologize that we can't have an answer for you now, but we can't have an answer for you now. The date for the January meeting, we do know that's January 17th, whatever that Wednesday. January 17th is the date for the January Finance Committee meeting, which is where we will be discussing the Transportation Center. Let's see. Someone commented on the Transportation Center. It should have been done with the high school. If it had been done with the high school, it would be exactly where we have discussed. That's where it was planned to be done with the high school. I just want to, if you wanted it done there, that's where it would be. Let's see. Will the buses have seatbelts? Buses are one of the most highly regulated kinds of vehicles there are, and they don't generally have seatbelts. They are designed to protect against a certain kind of thing. It's not up to us. The state decides the standards for buses. Right? Do I have that correct, Chris? So, because Pennsylvania buses don't have seatbelts, they won't have seatbelts. Let me open it up to other members of the board okay, go ahead, Jenna.
Sorry, I had a chance to go back through those notes that I was taking. So there was another comment about people didn't know we were having this meeting. This is a regularly scheduled meeting. It's on the district calendar. So I apologize for that if people didn't know, but it is publicized. It's certainly not something we're hiding. We frankly like
scheduled for a year.
Yeah, and we announce when the next meeting is at the end of every meeting. So I apologize if folks didn't know, but it is out there. The other comment I wanted to respond to, and I am very sensitive to this as well. I know, I think it was our last speaker mentioned that some folks don't like speaking in public, and we're afraid to speak. So I just want to remind folks, you can always email us confidentially. There's a couple different ways that you can communicate with us. First is just like this, coming to a meeting and speaking at the meeting. You can submit written comments via that kind of feedback module, but that does become public. So if you do want to communicate with us privately, you can always email us. That's not something that we would publish publicly. So by all means, for people who either aren't comfortable because they just don't like public speaking, or aren't comfortable because of the confidentiality of whatever they want to share, or fear of retribution, or whatever it is, I'll just remind folks, you can always email us. Our email addresses are on the district website.
I should just clarify that anything that is sent to the board is potentially discoverable. It's not, we won't just publish it, but it is potentially discoverable. If it did have personal information or that kind of thing, it would be redacted before it was shared. But we are a public institution, and so everything is potentially, at least potentially public. But you don't have to explicitly make it public by speaking at a public meeting. Sending it to board members gets it to our eyes and ears just as effectively. Jeff.
So I'm not going to repeat things that have already been said, because Jenna and Mark stole some of what I wanted to address. People that say there's work to be done and that they're hurting the community, I want to say again that we hear you and we agree with you. There was a question asked about anti-bias training, and yes, we all committed to do that last week when asked around this table. And that commitment is real, and I want everyone to know that. I can't sit here yet today and tell you who will lead it or how it will happen, but I can tell the community that those discussions are already underway. And as soon as that process is identified, and is identified through a proper source to provide that training, you have my word sitting here as the president of this school board, that will be training that we all undergo. It's something that people should do. It's something we've committed to, and it will happen. And I want that statement to resonate so that everybody knows of our intent to cure the hurt and our intent to grow and heal, as the words I used last week or whenever that meeting was that I spoke at. So that's real. As to the taking of notes, I want to echo Ms. Evans that I apologize to anyone that thinks that is rude. I do my best to try to make eye contact with people, but yet take down what they say. I'm not a typist, I'm a writer. And like, everybody can see my pad if anybody wants to see it. Everything just about that everybody said, I've written down for the same reason that Ms. Evans said, because A, I want to know it. B, if necessary, I want to respond to it, and I want to have it so that I can look back. And so when somebody says to me at another meeting, when did you decide on the anti-bias training or whatever, I have those notes. And these pads are real for me. They are a continuum of every public participation comment that has been said in my 4 years on this board, and that will continue for as long as I'm on this board. So if anyone is offended by that, I duly apologize. But please know that every single one of us, and I'll speak for the board when I say this, we listen intently and we hear what you say. That's part of what we have to do up here and part of what we will do. I don't think we need to belabor the process any longer. As Mr. Sirota said, this is all new news to us, but we're going to figure it out. As Dr. Smith said, we will notify the community very, very promptly, given that we only have 30 days. And, you know, things to think about is if we do have interviews of board members, they do have to happen in public. That is a requirement. We did that, I don't know, 18 months ago or whenever we did it. And so, you know, there is that level of public discourse and public disclosure in that process. I will state that I think, you know, soliciting applications and then having some type of process like that is what I would advocate for. We're not here to discuss that tonight, but I'll throw it out there. We had a discussion of policy last week, thinking about what happens in these types of situations, and we came up with ideas of creating a bank of interested people and things like that, all of which are great for the future, but they're not necessarily going to be practical or viable right now. So we got to figure it out. We will let the community know as promptly as possible, and we will do our best to ensure that our duty under the law, which is to select a replacement, is done properly and with proper community exposure as we're required to do under the law. I think that's what I had to add.
All right, I just have one more I found in my notes about zoning exceptions. Will be discussed, I assume, next week as part of the presentation.
I agree, but I know Mr. Slaughter is here. I think addressing, because I heard two things. I heard destroying wetlands and I heard circumventing zoning, and I don't want anyone to leave tonight. While we may address that next week, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, can you just talk to those two things, please? Just so we don't leave here with any misconceptions.
Sure. So in our report, all the plans for the bus facility and the evaluation of the bus facility took into account the wetlands and the setback that's required by the state of Pennsylvania and the Department of Environmental Protection. There's nothing that is within that wetland area or within the setback. In addition to that, the bus facility is allowable through the zoning ordinance, and it's section 22-39, paragraph A, subparagraph 3. It specifically states that a bus facility is allowable in the zoning ordinance, but it does require an accessory use approval from the township, not a variance. So both of those items brought up.
All right, and Bill, while you're here, maybe this is Megan. Fort Washington renovations considered done. I know we have the canopy over the front still to be done. Is there?
Yeah, so the canopy is set to be done in June, July, over the summer. There's a long lead item with steel, and the permit process is underway with the township for that. Everything else is done. There is still some commissioning taking place inside the building on the HVAC systems.
All right, and the fields are still being grown in, or, you know, where are we with the
So the
exterior?
seating in that field was done. It's seen some abuse, but, you know, just not abuse, wrong word. Children playing on it, wearing out some of the grass. So we're working with Mr. Lester on a program for overseeding and fertilization of that area.
All right, thanks, Bill. And Chris, the 10-year replacement target, not just pulled out of the air, I assume. Do you want to talk about that number?
Yeah, so that's the reason why 10 years is the goal, is because after 10 years, buses, while yes, they do last past 10 years, the cost of maintenance on those buses increases significantly, and the value of those buses comes down significantly as well for resale, as we have found out over the last few years.
Right. All right. Thanks, Chris. And so, yeah, to clarify, we are currently talking about replacing buses as old as 16 years, but over the next few years, as seen in the chart, that number decreases pretty rapidly. Why is the Anne Frank Diaries not in the curriculum? That's a question that the curriculum folks can answer next. Oh, can you answer it now?
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'm not going to speak specifically to Anne Frank, but what I will speak to is that the Teaching and Learning Department and I have started to compile, just so that we have a reference sheet to be able to answer some of the questions, a summary of where are we teaching, whether that's the Holocaust or Jewish culture or other cultures in our community. So we are working on putting that together. We are also working on and have started to develop already a list of potential professional development providers and topics. Some in the community have shared some with me. We are certainly open, if you are aware of something, to please pass it to me, and I'd be happy to add it to the list for when I review them with the school board to determine what might be the most appropriate for us. While I'm commenting, the only other two things that I would comment on is that, again, we did just learn tonight of the vacancy, and I would hope by at least the end of this week, we'll at least announce that vacancy and whatever information we can share, and then certainly as soon as we can put out more details and what a timeline might look like. And just to reiterate, the facility, transportation facility conversation is just a conversation in January at the next Finance Committee meeting to have a presentation and discuss what might potentially be recommendations from the Finance Committee moving forward. But we will look into the curriculum and specifically Anne Frank.
All right. Anything else from other board or administration? Okay. So with that, I will announce our next Finance Committee meeting, as we said, will be Wednesday, January 17th at 6 p.m. right here in the Upper Dublin High School Cardinal Room. You should expect communications from us about filling the board vacancy coming hopefully this week. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.